What's going on, everyone? Welcome back to Sharpen the Public. As always, I'm your host, Deej, back again with my co-host, Andy, preparing everyone for the Super Bowl here on Sunday. Super Bowl 58, Andy. It's already here. We're past our 1 week. I didn't watch any of the Pro Bowl. I watched some of the clips of Jalen Hurts missing a lot of the passing prop things. But yeah, I'm excited to talk more Super Bowl with you. How are you?
I'm doing well. I also didn't really watch any of the Pro Bowl. I was kind of confused by what was going on because it was on at the places that I was out at on Sunday. But when I looked, it was like they were playing tug of war one moment, then the next looked like they were playing American Ninja Warrior. And then it'd be like, oh, now they're playing football. So I didn't really understand how it worked, but it did look fun. It did look like a bunch of grown athletes having a middle school or high school field day out there. So I hope that people enjoyed it if you watched it. I feel like I've heard more about the Senior Bowl and how well Spencer Rattler did at that than I have the actual Pro Bowl. So already starting to get excited for NFL draft season, but can't dive into that too much yet because, who would we be if we weren't spending every single day of the 2 weeks prepping for the Super Bowl, right? So
yeah, there is going to be an overload of information available to everyone. There already has over the last week and into this next week. We're here recording this on Tuesday. Hopefully I'll get it out tomorrow on Wednesday. So even more information for everyone to back their own bets that they place before Sunday. We're up to nearly 500,000 bets being placed on the Super Bowl, and I will not be surprised if that crosses 1 million. I would be probably surprised if it crosses like 3 million. I think we'll get upwards of 2.
So I read a projection, and it completely blows your estimate out of the water, like an insane amount. And it read that they are projecting to receive 68 million different wagers on the Super Bowl. Now that's not just the game.
Right.
There's all kinds of other shit that people are going to bet on. They're going to bet on it on illegal sites. They're going to bet on it on offshore sites. They're going to bet on it on sites that aren't necessarily tracked from the stuff that we use. The stats that we use are mainly with some of the bigger sports books, and that's tracked through independent agencies and stuff. So that's why you see a 68 million number, and then the number that DJ's talking about is purely just the game through the books tracked.
Yeah, it's just spreads, totals, and I think money line as well. It's nothing like props or anything like that. It's all just straight bets. So you're not going to touch nearly those numbers. But I like to reference those because it kind of gives us a sense of what we talked about last year and the amount of bets on specific games and the amount of focus on specific games. Obviously, the Super Bowl is going to have the most. I've seen that over $20 billion is expected to be wagered on this Super Bowl, which is insane.
It's awesome.
Yeah, I think the books have already had a very, very good year. That happens no matter what, despite the public also doing well this year. So I'm sure that they're just going to keep raking in the profits here after the Super Bowl. I think the watch percentage of the Super Bowl, like the people expected to watch, is up 10% this year. And I don't know if that's the Travis Kelce, Taylor Swift narrative or just the fact that football is becoming more and more prevalent worldwide as well as just here in the US. So a lot of things like from that point of view, which are really interesting. But if we're looking at the bet stuff, the line moved back in favor of the Niners. It hit 2.5 and now it's kind of settled back at 2 after being 1.5 last week when we talked about it. So what are your initial thoughts on that?
My first thought is thank God that I didn't get burned because I thought taking it at -1.5 when it opened, I was going to be sitting pretty. So as long as it doesn't dip down to 1 or a pick 'em, which I don't anticipate, I think it's going to stay at 2 and 2.5 range. Never going to hit 3 again like it did at open, and I don't think it's going to dip all the way back down to 1.5 again like it did shortly after the open. So they've got their spot finally. I was surprised there's been more back and forth, but I think since it is such a tight game and it is so one-sided with how people are betting Patrick Mahomes, the reigning Super Bowl champion, I think that also plays into it a little bit too.
Yeah. Currently, the bets sit at 70% of the tickets on the Chiefs, as well as 70% of the money. So we originally saw it where I think it was like 80% of the bets and 70% of the money or something like that. So more bets have come in on the Niners. Obviously, there's been some sharp action moving the line in favor of the Niners off that 1.5. So a lot of teeter-totter here, but I think you're right. I think it's kind of settled here at this 2 number and probably will not go off of that. We've got the Mahomes as a dog narrative. We've got the Mr. Irrelevant and the Niners and what can they do. They've looked like, if we look at the recent history of the NFL, it feels like the team that is performing the best will win the Super Bowl, or like performing at the right moments. And the Chiefs seem to have had their hardest stretch of playoff opponents ever in the Mahomes era, going up against the Bills and the Dolphins and the Ravens, whereas the Niners have barely scraped by the Packers and the Lions. So I know we're just kind of rolling into it, but that's kind of how like I see it right now. Like I want to be on the Niners because I feel like they are the better team, but right now I don't see that. I see the Chiefs being able to stop them in some way.
There's a couple different ways that I can make my case for why I'm backing the 49ers. One of them would be just breaking it out position group by position group, which I think is important, and you can talk about the talent gaps. But at the end of the day, the most important position of quarterback, you're going to win the argument every single time because Mahomes is like a good leap and bound above Brock Purdy. However, I do agree with you that I think the best team in football typically ends up being the one that wins the Super Bowl. We've seen our anomalies, right? And we've seen anomalies where teams squeak into the Super Bowl and then fall flat on their face. The Chiefs have seemingly covered up some of the shortcomings that they've had along the way, where they have seen Kelsey, who started to see a dip in form towards the second half of the season, pick back up and be reliable in the playoffs. We've seen them figure out ways to get Rashee Rice involved, whether it's getting short creative passes or building up that offense through running the ball and then being able to take a deep shot to him, to MVS, to one of their guys that is only going to make maybe like 1 or 2 catches a game, but that 1 or 2 catches a game is going to be like for 20, 30, 40 yards, and you get a big play that then propels the offense to get into a scoring position. There's no rhyme or reason to how they're able to do this with the offense, besides that they're able to get creative and do certain things with Mahomes, that although I feel like we could go position group by position group and put the 49ers ahead of them in every area, that's why the spread is only 2, because they're going up against somebody who people are absolutely loving to put into GOAT debates, but if he loses Monday morning, they're going to be like, oh, did we jump the gun on it? I don't know. And it's, no, you didn't jump the gun. He is that special.
Yeah, I mean, the Chiefs money line is down now down to plus 110. And if you like the Chiefs, it's honestly just take their money line at that point. Get rid of that juice, because if this game is close and, they get the ball at the end, they're going to find a way to win. I just find it that simple. So the Niners game plan has to be able to figure out ways to dominate the first half and not get behind, because I think if they go into the second half behind the Chiefs, even if the Chiefs manage to score maybe once or only 10 points, they're going to have a really difficult time just figuring out how to stop Mahomes' offense, because they're going to play drives like they need to get to 4th and 2, and then they're going to go for it on 4th and 2 because they're that confident and that capable of converting and just hold the ball and win the game, because that's what we saw Brady do for years. And, this is that new era where, teams can kill you by just not giving you the ball back.
Yeah. So I actually disagree with you there. I don't think that they necessarily need to worry about that as much. I feel like they have enough to where they're not going to have to worry about that. But I do think that they have enough weapons that no matter how the Chiefs decide to do it on defense, that there is going to be enough at Brock Purdy's disposal and enough preparation over the next 2 weeks where they should be able to fight their way back into the game. For me, I feel like the Chiefs are going to take a strategy where it's more so going to be focused on Christian McCaffrey. We saw them do anything and everything to try to stop and limit Lamar Jackson. And you and I talked about it last week. Lamar still was able to drive down the field and then right at the end had those 2 turnovers that cost them the game, when realistically, like if they were able to convert on both of those, we'd be talking about a completely different ball game here. We'd be talking about a Super Bowl rematch from 10 years ago, not a Super Bowl rematch from 4 years ago with the Ravens, because I think the Ravens would have won then. But the piece there for me is like, are they actually going to be able to stop Christian McCaffrey? And I think that they're going to be able to limit him in some ways against the run, but he's still going to have his where like McCaffrey is like in the playoffs. McCaffrey is averaging 18.5 carries for 94 yards, and that's just rushing. Like we're not even talking about passing the ball. I think if they limit him rushing the ball, he's going to be just as available for that short option for Purdy, as well as out wide to catch the ball too. So I think you can limit him in one dimension, but you're not going to be able to kill him in the multitude of dimensions that he's feasible. And the other piece here too is like you get him there, but then you've also got the George Kittle, the Ayuk, the Debo. Like there's so much going on. And one that I really want to talk about is Purdy running the ball. I mean, he's started to run the ball a little bit more, and we've seen them really utilize him running the ball only in situations where they were in close games this year, or now in the playoffs that you're on the big stage. It's like, all right, we don't need to worry about protecting Purdy as much and making sure that he makes it to the postseason. Now we can actually let him run, which he has had a little bit in his profile all along. It's just people don't like to talk about it.
Yeah, I totally get what you're saying from the Niners offense standpoint. They've got a plethora of weapons. However, they have not utilized them to the best of their abilities over the past couple of weeks. I mean, even the Packers defense was able to stymie them for 3 quarters until, they figured it out finally. I think it's good that Debo's back, healthy after another 2 weeks for him. I think that's going to be huge. I really like him to score a touchdown, and we can get into that later when we talk about props. But like it feels like as of recently in the NFL, teams with a better offense win more often, and especially in the Super Bowl, and that's what we saw last year. Obviously, 38-35, the Chiefs scored more than the Eagles, and we lost the turnover battle, and that ended up poorly for us. And I think it's a bit different here, and that's one of the reasons I like the under. And I've already taken the under at 47.5. Is this Chiefs defense is incredibly dominant, ridiculously dominant, and they held this Ravens offense that was one of the most prolific in football and destroyed the Niners to what? Obviously turnovers happen, and that's part of a defense, right? And maybe it was Lamar's mistakes, or maybe it's Spags figuring it out for him. But they stopped Lamar, and I think they will find ways to stop this Niners offense enough to get Mahomes the ball enough times where he can score and win them the game. That's the way I'm leading. Again, I'm really iffy on this spread and money line. I might just throw a bet on Sunday on the Chiefs money line, but I'm still going back and forth on the spread. I think this Chiefs defense is really, really dominant, and then conversely, on the other side of the ball, the Niners defense, while it was great early in the year against the run, has been significantly terrible over the last couple of weeks against the run. And Pacheco looks like he's carrying the Chiefs offense on his back at times, and that scares me for Niners being favored.
Yeah, he runs angry.
That's for sure.
Pacheco
He definitely runs
angry,
angry.
dude.
He definitely runs angry.
Yeah. No, he's awesome. He's averaging 21 carries for 83 yards in the 3 playoff games. So, like, Pacheco's having an awesome postseason. To your point, and then we can kind of talk about some more of our different bets, but I just want to point this out about the Niners offense. I don't think that they were necessarily stymied by the Packers and the Lions. I think that we were just used to seeing them blow out these teams throughout the season, and now that it's come down to playoff time, and they caught a Green Bay team that you gave them more credit than I did, and I was big on Green Bay this season. Like, they were in pretty good form heading into the playoffs, and they looked red hot and like a really solid, legit team, especially the defense had just grown up before our eyes, and those receivers for Green Bay, but that's besides the point. Like, McCaffrey still had 17 rushes, 98 yards in that game. George Kittle had a game, 4 receptions, 81 yards. That was the Juwan Jennings game too, 5 receptions, 61 yards. Like, that's something that we haven't even talked about yet because he hasn't really done much since then. He didn't do shit against the Lions. I think on the other side too, like, yes, it took them a bit to get going against the Lions. I think the Lions came out with a kick-ass game plan and kind of punched them in the mouth. I think because that happened, it's a bit humbling, and I don't see that happening again in the Super Bowl. I'd be so surprised to see them get punched in the mouth 2 games in a row where they had to rally back. I know that the Chiefs are better than both these teams that they played. The Chiefs have had a harder road to get here. I mean, I like all 3. Well, maybe not the Dolphins, but I like the Bills and Ravens a lot more than Green Bay and Detroit. I would actually be surprised. That's something I'm going to be looking for if they get punched in the mouth 3 games in a row in the playoffs. And I think 2 weeks of prep is going to help. Like, McCaffrey still had 90 yards against the Lions. Debo had a great game. Ayuk 68 yards, and McCaffrey had 42 receiving. I mean, Kyle Juszczyk had 33 receiving. Like, we don't know who's going to get the ball is the issue, because there are so many that are going. And I think you saying that some of them were stymied makes sense because we're used to seeing certain guys do it, but we've seen some different characters kind of step in here which makes you really like what they're going to be able to do on the offense. And down to talk about the defense too, but honestly, I'm kind of ready to start cracking into some of these bets at the same time.
Yeah, we can get into that. I wanna rebut. So when I say stymie, I mean they scored 14 points in the first 3 quarters against the Packers after having 2 weeks of rest. They didn't know who they were going to play, but that's beside the point. It was the Packers. I think the Chiefs' defense is far better than the Packers, and we know that based on the points per game allowed over the course of the season. What the Niners are number 3 and the Chiefs are number 2, or vice versa, or whatever. So 2 of the best defenses in football, and Chiefs are on the still going up and up, and the Niners are kind of on the other side of that, in my opinion. Obviously, we saw Aaron Jones have a great game against the Niners. We saw David Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs both rush for over 50, 60-plus yards. So I know what you're saying, and I get it, but I don't know if the burden of proof is there for the Niners in the playoffs. I completely think their offense is incredibly dominant, but Spags and this Chiefs defense have been shown to, take matters into their own hands for the Chiefs in the playoffs here. So a lot of points to talk about, but I guess that's where we're both leaning on sides. Obviously, I'm leaning Chiefs. You're leaning Niners. You said you like the under as well.
Yeah, so I'd be happy to talk about that. I was gonna touch on that a bit later after I give some of my props, but I think I can kind of relate the props to the total. So
do the total.
If you want
first.
to dive into the total, if you want to dive into the total, a lot of my props are related to running the ball, and it kind of leads me to walking towards that total play, as well as just talking about, you and I just talked about how good the defenses are. So, and if y'all ever even listened to this podcast before, you know that we are a pro under podcast, and that's not a secret. Pacheco is averaging 21 carries this postseason. McCaffrey's averaging 18.5. Brock Purdy is averaging 5.5, which is surprising. And then Mahomes has had 6 rushes per game in his last 2. He only had 2 against Miami, but he didn't need a run because they were kicking their ass.
Yeah.
That is close to around 50 to 52 total plays of just running the ball, and that's with 4 dudes. San Fran averaged 60 plays a game, which ranked number 26 in the NFL. KC was a bit higher at 63.8 for a rank of number 14. So those two, don't get the 52 plays that I just said mixed up with the 60 and 63.5. That's different stuff. But I do want to point out the ranks, how San Fran has had very low number of plays in their games this season, as well as KC. They're right there in the middle of the pack.
Mm-hmm.
But we're talking about with rushing, so running the clock, with running low amounts of plays, let's just put that to the side. We're talking about 2 of the highest level defenses in the NFL, where we've got KC, who is allowing 16.8 points per game this season, and San Fran is just behind them in 3rd place for the best points per game allowed at 18.4. The Chiefs have only allowed more than 20 points just 3 times this season. Week 1 versus the Lions, which they lost 21-20. Week 11 versus your Birds, which was the beginning of the downfall, but hey, you still beat the team that's in the Super Bowl and got your revenge after last year, but they lost 21-17. And the Bills get the crown for most points on them, which happened in the divisional round, so a couple weeks ago. But the Chiefs still won 27-24. I think something that, and you pointed out how the Niners offense hasn't looked as dominant as we are used to them doing in the regular season, where we saw them just come out and beat the piss out of other teams and score a ton of points. I'm going to go and talk about the Chiefs here. The Chiefs are also not ones to really even go punch anybody in the mouth and blow any teams out this season. They only ranked number 15th in the league in points per game scored at 22.1. And your and I's back and forth just shows, as well as the back and forth you've probably heard throughout the media all week, this is going to be a close one, I think, which means that it's going to be a blowout one way or the other, because when everyone thinks it's going to be close, somebody's going to blow them out. But blowout still works the under. But anywho, I do think it's going to be close. I think it's going to be an entertaining chess match with plenty of defense, though, and plenty of running the ball, because that's where the advantage is for the Chiefs. That Niners defensive line, although it's absolutely star-studded with names, it should be on paper the most talented defensive line in the league. They haven't produced the actual results in the trenches that you would expect from the star power on their back. And But just one last thing about the Chiefs here, like I think the Chiefs are going to run the ball a lot, and I'll get into that when I talk about my Pacheco prop. But the Chiefs' first 2 drives against Baltimore, DJ, when you combine the time together, lasted 15 minutes against like the best defense in the league. I think the Baltimore's defense was number 1 in the league.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Like they're not going to be messing around with this one either, in my opinion, where they're going to be taking their time. It's going to be long drives. The commercial companies are going to be pissed because they're not going to be able to air as many commercials. But fuck them. We're going to make money because we're going to be betting the under.
Yeah.
I'm taking under 47.5 for not 1, not 2.
Oh,
but 3 units.
3 units
on the under.
Sharpen the Public first.
I think I only had 1 3-unit play. I don't have my spreadsheet pulled up. I should have it pulled up for final episode of the season, but I don't have it pulled up. But yeah, I do have the under for what is tied for my biggest play of the year. And I know that's kind of corny, that's the Super Bowl, but I do feel that it is a bit high here. And with all of the public, well, not necessarily the public, I think with how many people are going to be betting on this game, it's going to fall into this philosophy that we have joked about and teased people who actually think this way for so long, that, oh, I don't have any action of the game. I want to see an entertaining game. I'm going to bet the over. It's going to happen. This is like the game for that to happen in the Super Bowl. So I'm gonna zag just like you are. And who would we be repping the under all year if we didn't take it in the last game possible?
Absolutely. I'm completely in agreement on the under. I think specifically with what you said about the rushing stuff, I think both teams are really going to focus on the run because obviously the Chiefs have used it all year with the lack of wide receiver prowess that they've had all season. And then, Isaiah Pacheco being so good. And then on the other hand, obviously Christian McCaffrey and the Niners have just been so dominant, and even Debo running the ball. Conversely, like the defense of the Niners has, I've mentioned it, I've alluded to it, but I think they allowed like 4.1 yards per carry in the regular season, but now are up to 5.6 in the playoffs, which is abysmal for them. And obviously the Chiefs are going to make that part of their game plan because they seem to game script and game plan better than anyone in football, because it feels like every time the Chiefs get the ball first, they manage to score. So I'm not going to be scared if, it's 14-14 in the first half. I still think we're going to get an under 47.5. I want to focus a lot on trends here too in this episode, because that's something that we obviously focus here on Sharpen the Public. Over the last 8 games where the Super Bowl has been in the 40s, it's 6-2 to the under. So that's a great sign for us, I think.
Could I add, before last year's Super Bowl, that was a shootout, the under had cashed in 4 straight Super Bowls as well.
Yeah.
So the under was on a run, especially as sports betting has become more and more prominent over the last 5 years.
Yeah, that's a huge part. Currently, obviously, sitting at 47.5. Public's on the over, 55%. Money's on the under, 64%, giving the money or a sharp differential towards the under at 19%. We've seen that do really well over the course of the season. Obviously, the Public's had a fairly decent year backing the over in comparison of how they've done as a whole historically, but they still went negative back in the over. And I think the point that you made is kind of what we've alluded to over the past 2 years that we've talked about totals on Sharpen the Public. Is this is one of those games where people are going to be like, okay, time to bet because everyone else is betting, and it's happening more so than it has over the past couple of years. I'm going to bet. I want to see points. It's that simple. And I don't think we're going to see that in this game. I think it's 2 dominant defenses, and it's going to be played much more methodically than it was last year. Obviously, the Eagles, it was a different Chiefs team, and obviously the Eagles were offensively incredible. We saw some weird things happening with the field, and the game just opened up immediately. I think both of these teams are going to focus on limiting turnovers and keeping the ball, and especially the Niners. They don't want to give the ball back to Mahomes, because we know what happens when that happens. He only needs 13 seconds to make something happen. So I'm in complete agreement with you. I'm only hunted for a unit, not 3 units, but I'd love to see that you're that confident.
Yeah, I feel really good about it. I mean, there's like a lot of stuff that kind of plays into my other plays that falls on this philosophy, in my opinion, of how the game's going to go. But I do think that even if we are wrong and it ends up being a shootout, that I do still feel confident in my player props, because there's other stuff that goes into it besides that. I think it's going to be slow and managed well by both sides.
Perfect. I love it. So yeah, I'm on Chiefs. Well, not on, but liking Chiefs. You're all liking Niners. We're both on the under. I've got a bunch of trends that I want to talk about before we get to some props, if that's okay with you, Andy.
Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, so specifically speaking on like what happens in the game, obviously we can talk about teams that come into the game and trends about specific teams and whatnot, but specifically what happens in the game, and we can kind of talk about whether this is kind of why I think the Chiefs would win or cover versus not cover. But teams that rush for more yards in the Super Bowl are 40-14 ATS. So whoever wins in the last, 40, 14, and 3. What is that? That's 57, and I don't think they had totals or spreads in this first Super Bowl. So there you go. There's your 57 games.
So you think, I mean, like, let's just say it how it is. Like, who do you think is going to have more rushing yards, Pacheco or McCaffrey? Because I think, like, if you just pose this question in September before the season started and said, all right, Niners and Chiefs are going to make the Super Bowl, who's going to rush for more yards? You're going to say McCaffrey every time. But I think it's quite impressive that Pacheco has actually put himself into this type of conversation where you could think about, Pacheco could be one to do it.
Yeah, I mean, the odds say McCaffrey's rushing line is 91.5, but Pacheco's is 67.5. So that makes things a little more difficult. But I mean, the trend is the team. So, if you get 40 yards from Mahomes, you get 60 yards from Pacheco, there's 100 yards, and then you manage to beat McCaffrey's 92. So that's a whole thing. That's a whole nother, and you could obviously talk about Debo and Brock, and there's a whole nother side of it. But
and Purdy's 20. Come on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So there's that. That's interesting. A lot of these trends, sadly, outline that the Eagles should have covered last year. They're the most recent team that did not cover, being outrushed or being the outrusher were the Eagles last year. Teams that average more passing yards per attempt in the Super Bowl are 37-17 ATS. Also lost last year as the Eagles out past Mahomes and the Chiefs, sadly. But another thing, so more offense obviously gives you better of a chance to win the Super Bowl. In the 45 previous Super Bowls, and where there was a turnover advantage, the team that had fewer turnovers lost 8 times, going 35-9 ATS. Teams that win the time of possession battle are 41-16 straight up and 39-15-3 ATS. Another crazy record, 72% in fact. And obviously the Eagles were also on the losing edge of that last year, having the ball for 11.5 minutes longer than the Chiefs last year. So sadly, talking badly about the Eagles and showing that they should have won. But teams that hold an edge in those at least three of those 4 categories that I just talked about are 36-9 ATS. And the last one that I want to talk about is teams that meet all 4 of those conditions. So rush for more, pass for more, win the time of possession battle, and have less turnovers are 24-1-1 ATS in the Super Bowl. And the Eagles didn't fail to do that last year, but the Eagles in 2004, when we lost to the Chiefs, managed to do that. So Philadelphia just killing those stats there. Pretty sad, but crazy, crazy stuff.
Yeah, those are all extremely one-sided, where I feel like it's insane that they've been able to track stuff like that, but also you have to have the stars aligning for a couple of them. I feel like we're going to get a bit more of a mixed bag on who does well passing the ball, who does well running the ball in this one. I don't think it's just going to be so one-sided. But again, like I said, whenever everyone thinks it's going to be a close game, I feel like it just kind of that is sports. That's not just football. That there's going to be a blowout.
Oh yeah,
so we'll see.
Absolutely. I've got some more from you. I know this is the Super Bowl, so we have to be thorough. Okay,
yeah.
So the teams with the better straight-up win percentage entering the Super Bowl, 1-15 ATS over the last 20 years, and that is the Niners. They are the better team record-wise. So that's insane that it's that bad. 1-15 ATS is a pretty significant trend. Can you guess the team that managed to cover?
No.
The Patriots against the Falcons in the 28-3 game. Kyle Shanahan.
Yeah. Wait, sorry. What was the trend again? Like
So
1-18.
1-15 ATS is the team that is the better record in the Super Bowl over the last 20
whoever
years.
has a better record
Does not cover.
Has only covered once.
Correct.
And that's the Niners.
The Niners have the better record. They were 13-5 or 4 or something. 13-4, I think.
Yeah, I'm screwed. That's the one. That's the one.
That's a killer, right? It's a killer.
That's bad.
But you're going to make it up on this one with your under bet. So when two teams are on extended rests, obviously they do going into the Super Bowl, 108-54-1 to the under.
Yeah, that's not surprising to me. But Super Bowl's captured in that, obviously, as well as like, is that just general playoffs?
It's any game, any regular season. It's anything over the last 5 years. 1, 2, 3. Yeah, over the last 5 years, a team's on extended when both teams are on extended rest, the under is 108-54-1.
Yeah, that's something that we talked about heading into the divisional round. That's something that we've talked about with like coming off of a bye. That's stuff. Those are narratives that have been around for a while, but I think kind of hearing it in the grand scheme of things, we put it all together is still pretty fascinating that it's hitting at that big of a clip.
This one's insane. I get a lot of my trends from doing research, but shout out to Evan Abrams from Action, who does a really, really good job with trends. So I'm not saying that I figured this out myself, but this is a long one. In his NFL career, Patrick Mahomes is 26-5 straight up against a defense allowing fewer than 20 points per game. When that game is on the road or at a neutral site like the Super Bowl, he's 16-1 straight up. That's insane. Again, he's better against good defenses.
Yeah, that is part of what that is saying. I think the other part is like we are talking about somebody who is so great. At the same time, there is also like, I don't know. I'm not trying to discredit him, but that is an insane stat. But you're also starting to get really specific with how you're defining.
Oh, I know.
Defining some of these.
But it's fun. It's a trend. I mean, it's 16-1's insane for a specific
and
game.
Niners fit into this
against good defenses, right? So that's huge. Yeah. I mean, there's so many Mahomes trends that we could talk about, like how he's 9. I think he's 9-0-1 ATS in his career when he's been a dog of at some point over 2.5 points or 2 points, which obviously they opened up at 3. So
yeah, so that is he's 10-1-1 as a dog ATS just in general, with 9 outright wins and those career underdog wins, and then 3-0 as a dog straight up in the playoffs.
Yeah, it's insane.
Yeah, he's insane, but at the same time, like he's also one of the greatest of all time. So this is like fascinating stuff, but like this is also stuff that we saw from Brady. Like in the trend you read off, he's the fifth most profitable on money line in that trend you were talking about behind Peyton, Eli, Brady, and Favre. Like we're putting him in some of the most elite names of all time. So I'm ready for it means he's due, right? And for the Niners. The Niners are going to play spoiler.
That's one way to put it. Okay, I have plenty of trends, and I'll try and put some in my article that I released for the Super Bowl. But yeah, there's too many to talk about. If there's any more that you want to list off, go ahead. But I think we can get into our props.
Yeah, I'm ready to roll with my props. How many do you have?
I mean, I can have 10, but I probably only have 2 or 3 that I'm actually going to place right now.
Okay. I have 3 that I've actually put money on.
Okay, you go first.
So my first one, and I alluded to it, they're tied together, so I should say first and second, is relating to Isaiah Pacheco. Obviously, the inside linebacker situation for the Niners is awesome. They've got Greenlaw and Warner, but that run defense for them is allowing 4.1 yards allowed in the regular season, and they have also not been great allowing yards against the run in the playoffs either. We saw the Lions go after that to start the game, where that run defense was pretty susceptible to the Lions. They were not afraid to run Montgomery and Jahmyr Gibbs and get creative with both of those backs, which they should. That backfield's awesome. And I do think that like they showed that it works. The Chiefs have liked running the ball, especially as of late. I touched on it earlier. Pacheco's got 21 carries for 83 yards in 3 playoff games on average this season. Put that in perspective. Christian McCaffrey is averaging almost 3 less carries at 18.5 in their 2 playoff games. Has 94 yards, which, yes, obviously much more versatility to his game than just talking about the running. Like he is great with receiving yards too. And obviously he's getting more yards per carry than Pacheco, but they are living and dying by Pacheco. I mean, 2 of those games he had 24 carries, which is insane. I do think that because we've seen teams be unafraid of running the ball against the Chiefs defense with that D-line that has the names, but as we touched on, has kind of faltered in form a bit and hasn't really lived up to the hype since that Chase Young trade that they made. I do think that the Chiefs are also not going to be afraid to just run Pacheco and just go with him. That I'm surprised that this rushing yards total is so low at 67.5. Like, the Lions challenged the Niners, the Ravens challenged the Niners, even the Packers challenged the Niners with what was going on in that game. So I do feel that the Chiefs are going to be no different. Pacheco at over 67.5 rushing yards is now priced at minus 120. I believe you can probably find that on some fantasy sites and just do like a higher or lower type deal. I'm going with it at minus 120 for 2 units because I feel so good about his matchup here. I also am going to be going with Pacheco over 16.5 carries at minus 106 for a unit. So that is 3 units on Pacheco technically. But that is how much I like this matchup. And I think that it plays a lot into my underplay, which I talked about earlier. The Chiefs, like, they should focus on the mismatch they have at corner. I think those corners for San Fran can be a bit susceptible. But to do that, they also are going to need to establish the run, get the ball moving up the field with Pacheco. And then once you are able to establish the run, then you're going to be able to fire those deep shots that we see Mahomes do with some of these receivers that you're used to being memed. Like, I mean, this is why people get so pissed at Tony, because Tony had these opportunities throughout the season where they would establish the run and then he'd get a great look and then drop it, or something would go wrong. And that's also why you see like someone like MVS have a receiving yards total of 19.5. Like, he rarely gets that many catches, and he's only had more than one catch like once this season, I think. But it's always a good catch for one big play. Mm-hmm. It just depends on how many yards you expect that play to be. And I think the run really relates to that's going to be the way that they go here, as well as just depending on those short passes to Bryce, and obviously depending on Kelsey as much as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm completely in agreement. The Pacheco over was actually going to be one of my plays as well, so we're both on that. And I mean, I can echo the things that you're going to say. Like, the run game is going to be such a massive part, especially over the last, like I mentioned it multiple times already, I think, in this episode, but the 49ers defense has been so bad recently against the run. Over the last 5 contests, they've allowed 143.2 yards on the ground, which is abysmal. And Pacheco should feast here. And I like the amount of work he's going to get. I think he's going to be an integral part of this game plan to keep the ball out of the Niners' offenses. And, the Chiefs know that. So I think if, we like it this much, and I think given the history of Mahomes and this Chiefs offense in the Super Bowl, we saw Brady only win 4 MVPs. Maybe Mahomes doesn't win this one if they do it. So why not throw, Isaiah Pacheco plus 2,800 to win the MVP? 2,800
way.
Ain't bad. It ain't bad.
No way.
I'm asking. I'm not saying.
Oh, I thought you were about to give that out. It's stupid, right? The way they do the MVP thing, like, no matter, like, Pacheco could have 200 yards, they'd somehow still justify Mahomes getting it. And I hate to say that,
but we saw Cooper Kupp 2 years ago get it.
That's how
he scored twice.
Yeah.
So there. I mean, again, I said
for
the Brady
odds, I love it. For the odds, I love it.
Brady has he might have gotten the Super Bowl MVP in the Bucs, but he has 4 with the Patriots out of his 6 Super Bowls. So if Mahomes is on this track, likely he's not going to win the Super Bowl MVP every time he wins the Super Bowl. So, I mean, I'm looking, like, because I like the Chiefs, I'm kind of looking at, like, maybe Kelsey to win the MVP, or maybe even Pacheco, because this is that time that, he might not get it. But obviously those are down the line props, not necessarily what I'm saying I'm taking, like, on the podcast, because we try to be a little more, not so crazy with our bets. But my first play for the prop is Brock Purdy under 245.5 passing yards. It's down to 42.5 now. I'm sorry, 46.5 on FanDuel. I really value this Chiefs defense. I think that they're going to utilize or find ways to confuse Purdy and make things difficult for him, like they did to Lamar, like they did to Josh Allen, but like they did to Tua. Josh Allen kind of figured it out, and the Bills' woes were more than just what they could do on offense. I think at the end of the day, Shanahan is going to really focus on the run and create ways for his dynamic ball carriers to get the ball, and that's not always going to be through the air. I think this line is too high. He had 267 against the Lions. He had 252 against the Packers, and both of these defenses are not nearly as good as the Chiefs. Commanders 230, Ravens 255 on Christmas, so that's probably more comparable, and we're right around that 246.5. So in a slower paced game, I really like his under here.
I thought about looking into his over personally, but I didn't end up doing it because of all the other things that I like with how much I think they're going to be running the ball.
It also kind of goes into that what you talked about. What was it, last week or 2 weeks ago with his interception prop? I just don't know if he's going to be throwing it that often. Like, I mean, his attempts number was so low, right? So,
and then he threw a pick.
I think that plays into it too.
Yeah.
I think they're just going to be really systematic with how they move the ball, and they're not going to make any opportunity. They're not going to try and force anything if they don't need to. And this could easily go crazy, and we could see another Super Bowl where, like last year, where it's 38-35, and a lot of our takes go the other way. But I don't see that happening.
Oh yeah, I totally get the logic there. Something that I kind of touched on with another one of my props was what I think is going to happen with Christian McCaffrey. And I talked about it a bit with my thoughts for the Chiefs game plan. But ultimately, I do feel that like they're going to try to limit McCaffrey. And if they do that, then Purdy is going to have to get more creative, and there is going to be more passing involved if they are actually able to limit McCaffrey. Now, I don't know if they're going to be able to do that or not, but I think we'd be crazy to sit here and say that they should be focusing on anybody else as their number one priority is the defense besides McCaffrey, after they did such a successful job, for the most part, of doing it against Lamar in the weeks prior. Mm-hmm. So if that's the logic there, and Purdy's going to have to be throwing it more, and that was why I was maybe thinking the over. But I actually went with a different over of his that I really like. And because I think that they're going to be prepping for McCaffrey and all these other weapons are going to be kind of opening up and seeing what's in Brock Purdy's bag. Kittle, Ayuk, Debo, Christian McCaffrey. You add in Purdy running for 48 yards, only his second time rushing for more than 20 yards in just his sixth double-digit rushing game of the season. But he still did it in the NFC Championship game. That's something in his bag that's not really being talked about. And I don't think you prep for that as much if you're the Chiefs because you have so much other stuff to worry about. But we have really seen like Purdy kind of go into this running the ball thing in certain situations this season. And I kind of want to highlight that because his rush yards total was I think it was like 11.5 a day or two ago. Now it's at 12.5. I've seen it in 13.5 in some spots. So apologies if it has gone up, if it goes up to that by the time the podcast releases. But I find this to be such an intriguing spot, and not many people are going to want to talk about it because it only happens 6 times a season. But when were those 6 times? So week 1 at Pittsburgh, they blew him out 30-7. Purdy rushed 3 times 20 yards. Like, whatever, part of the blowout. I didn't really take any notes of that. Week 7 at Minnesota, Vikings win 22-17. So remember, this is when they had the Debo injury as well as the Trent injury, and Purdy rushed 5 times 19 yards. Then very next week against Cincinnati, Bengals win 31-17. Purdy rushed 6 times 57 yards. You see a trend here. When times are getting desperate, they're opening up different avenues for Purdy to go. You could, of course, attribute that to Trent when he's being out, like he has to scramble and run. But I also attribute that to, like, they need to open up new folds of the offense because they're already missing their secondary rushing option, Debo. Plus, like, when this has happened, besides those 2 instances, we've seen good results. November 19th versus Tampa Bay, Brock throws for 3 touchdowns but runs 4 times for 14 yards. Then the 2 playoff games, 6 rushes for 14 yards versus Green Bay, 5 rushes for 48 yards against Detroit. I think that when the Niners need it, they run Purdy to open up that other part of their game. And I do feel that it's been successful where, especially in that Lions game, part of the reason they came back is because they opened that up a bit more. The Lions were not expecting him to run the ball. and it opened up so much more of the offense. It allowed the other guys to get involved. That's why we saw Deebo end up having such a great game. There were other guys that I talked about when we were previewing the game earlier, and I touched on that game, that also did well. But a part of that is because Purdy was able to open it up and by bringing it on his feet. And I do think that 12.5 rushing yards is too low, where despite the minus 130 juice, I will be taking that for 1.5 units.
Which number are you getting? 11.5, you said?
12.5. I think 11.5 is gone as far as I can find.
It's available at 11.5 on BetMGM for minus 120.
Give me that shit right now.
Yes, it is. It is currently available. So I actually really like that play too. I think, just generally speaking, I in postseason type games, I have no stats to back this up, but I generally feel the quarterbacks run far more often than they're used to, and we've seen Brock Purdy over the last couple of weeks show that he's very capable using his legs, and I really like that play. I think I've been tracking this for a while. Even since like the 2020 Super Bowl, when I bet Mahomes to have over 28.5 or 29.5 rushing yards, and he had like 42 and then ran back 13 yards when they were kneeling the ball, and I hit the under, or I'd lost the over on that. So I have trauma backing a rushing prop for a quarterback in a Super Bowl, so I'll be off of that one. But I do value your play there, because I think there's a lot of value in a quarterback that can get around the pocket in this type of atmosphere. I'm also going to stick on the Niners side, but I'm going to go with an anytime touchdown scorer, because I was thinking about doing his yards, but I've already taken Brock's under passing yards. So I'm leaning Deebo to score. I think he is the most, I don't want to say dynamic, because McCaffrey is probably the most dynamic player on the Niners offense, but the ability of Deebo to create havoc and get around and his yak ability makes him one of the most prolific players in the NFL. He scored 13 times this season or something like that. He had 12 touchdowns this season, 7 receiving and 5 rushing, even missing 2 games. And I think he's incredibly valuable when it comes to this Niners offense. And if anyone's able to score, I think it'll be him. At plus 140, I think there's a lot of value. It was opened at closer to plus 180 and has dropped significantly. So I'm trying to get it now before it continues to even go down further. He hasn't been above plus 160 since week 1. And obviously we talked a little bit about it last week, or maybe it was 2 weeks ago, where, anytime touchdown scores are a little weird in the NFL, but I feel like in the Super Bowl, things get a little more what they should be. I think getting Deebo at anything better than 50-50 value at minus 110 or anything is really high here. I think they do manage to score a couple times, and Deebo's one of them. One thing I'd love to do in the Super Bowl too is I do it every year now, since in Vegas I used to, because I go to the Super Bowl every year in Vegas, but I'm not going this year. I would always place my half unit play on a fullback to score the first touchdown. I did that in 2020, Andrew, and Juszczyk was the second touchdown. I have to do it again. I have to do it again.
Yeah, you should.
Half a unit on Juszczyk to score the first touchdown. He's plus 4,400, Andrew.
Yeah. And like a first touchdown score like that is fun. That's what I want to do with Deebo Samuel, for the same logic that you have. And but just getting more value on the first touchdown, where I'm seeing him at. My offshore options here are ass. By the time Sharpen the Public comes back, sports betting will be legal here in North Carolina, so I don't have to go offshore. I've got plus 900 for the first touchdown. Do you see something
for Deebo?
better? Because I have to imagine that he's got
Deebo's plus
900.
Figures. Deebo's plus 900 on FanDuel.
He's not 4
I can
figures
tell you
anywhere else.
I can tell you. Let me look at my other stuff. Hold on. Deebo's best odds are 900. He's 900 everywhere. He's actually 800 on PointsBet and 650 at plus at Bet Rivers.
For first? That's insane.
Yeah, it's insane.
What is give me
best?
Deebo first touchdown or as a unit.
Oh, I can get Juszczyk at plus 5,000 for BetMGM, so I'll be on that.
Worth it.
I mean, there's a lot of fun props.
Yeah, any book besides BetUS.
There's so many fun bets that you can take in the Super Bowl, and obviously we try to stick to a little bit more football-based topics here. But I mean, Andy, every year it feels like you have a Gatorade color. What are you going with this year?
This year, I have actually not dove in it as much. And the reason why was because I was thrown off by the odds, where I was just put on to this peer-to-peer betting app here. And what they have, it's called Cut, Kutt. I'm not plugging an ad for them or anything. They're not paying me shit. But they have red at plus 150 and any other color minus 150 as their listed odds. But you have to take it with somebody like peer-to-peer.
DraftKings has red as plus 500.
I know. Every sportsbook has red at like plus 450, plus 500. But on this ad, it was, I don't know. I really don't know. I don't understand how it's like that. But there's no public bets available for it. There were earlier in the week, but I hadn't done my proper research on the Gatorade color. So I was like, fuck, I could have had phenomenal value if somebody took the other side, which I don't know. So I'll be putting like out a feeler into that. But the problem is somebody has to take the bet.
Right.
So I'm going to do it, but I don't know if it's actually going to be confirmed. What I do know is that when the Chiefs won last year, they went purple. Purple is my favorite color. Why would they not go with purple again this year? I don't have any intel like I normally do on what the other games they drank were, but I do remember seeing a lot of red.
I'm betting whatever color Taylor Swift is wearing. And if it's red, I'm betting red.
That's been a pretty polarizing battle on social media where there's so many stand-up guys that are just out there defending Taylor Swift like they know her or something. It's like, come on, y'all. You don't have to defend her just to have the zagging viewpoint. We want to watch football. We don't want to watch her from the stands. But hey, so be it. If that's how they truly feel about it, go ahead.
The storyline can be there. I don't mind it. And again, I mean, if it keeps people interested in football, it makes me happy. And as long as more people get interested, what's the harm? So that's my stance. But
yeah, we should get Taylor Swift into the UFC. Then we need to grow the game.
There you go. That'll be great. That'll be huge. There's a lot. There's going to be a lot of things to talk about over this next week. But what else? Is there anything else we want to talk about, Andy? I feel like I've gotten everything I need out.
DJ, this is the first year that I remember being able to bet America the Beautiful, and Post Malone is singing it this year. So in honor of that, I am going to bet the over on Post Malone to
no analysis.
Yeah, to sing America the Beautiful for longer than a minute and 10 seconds. That's on my second. Actually, no, Bovada is my number one, resident enemy number one for offshore books. So I will not be depositing into them. I will be finding another book that has that. But if they are the only one, then I will take their money by betting the over. That is my final thing to give out, though, is I will be going with America the Beautiful over 1 minute and 10 seconds. Because I do think the Post Malone is going to take his sweet time on that one. You know he's going to be kind of showing those chords for that upcoming country music album he's working on. So, yeah, that's all I really got, though. I mean, again, I really do think it's going to be a big running game here on both sides. There's plenty to show that the Chiefs are going to be susceptible to the run to Christian McCaffrey, but even more so, I feel like the Niners are also going to get exposed a little bit against the run. So, yeah, I'm really excited for this game. I know that originally I'd said that I wanted Ravens and Niners because I thought it was the two best teams, but ultimately, like, I do still feel like we got the two best teams because the Chiefs were able to pull it together. Now we'll just see if they truly did pull everything together with such a lack of offensive weapons, because time and time again, it just seems like if you were able to get to this point without that many offensive weapons, you do ultimately get exposed. But hey, that is also why Patrick Mahomes' name is being thrown around in the GOAT conversation. So we'll see who truly reigns supreme. But I got the Niners. It's the one bet I forgot to say is I'm taking Niners at whatever it's at now, -2 for 2 units.
There you go. There you have it. Yeah, it's gonna be a fun one. I'm really excited to get to the game on Sunday. There's nothing. I say there's nothing I love more than Super Bowl Sunday, but there are a lot of things. But I do in the football world. You know, there are isn't much better than Super Bowl Sunday. So I'm excited to get into it, excited to watch it. I was kind of in the same boat with you where I was kind of like, I'm not too excited about the Super Bowl teams that are in it. But over the past couple of weeks preparing and everything, I've come to appreciate it, and I am very excited for it. So yeah, it's going to be a fun one. Again, Andy's on the Niners. I lean Chiefs. We're both on the under. We love Pacheco props, his attempts and the over. I like Brock Purdy's under. On passing yards, I am taking Debo to score as well. And then I'm also going to throw a half a unit on Juszczyk to be the first touchdown scorer, as is my tradition for the Super Bowl. But it's been fun, Andy. I mean, you can roll off your bets, and then we'll talk about the future of Sharpen the Public for a little bit.
Yeah, so I've also got under 47.5 as my biggest play at 3 units. I've got Pacheco over 67.5 rushing yards for 2 units. I've got Pacheco over 16.5 carries for 1 unit. Brock Purdy over 11.5 rushing yards. Thanks for finding that extra yard and a bit of juice savings for me, DJ. For 1.5 units, I'm going to go with Debo, first-time touchdown scorer at plus 900 for half a unit. And I've got the 49ers, the Fighting Tony Montanas, at -2 for 2 units. Although I have my personal play that's significantly bigger than that. I'm not proud of how much I have on the 49ers to win. I do feel really good about that. But I got -1.5 2 weeks ago.
You can check out my article that'll, of course, always come out on Sunday. I'll probably release it maybe Friday or something just because it's the Super Bowl and we've been talking about it for a while, and do some updates or whatnot based on public betting data and stuff. But this will be the last episode of Sharpen the Public for the next month or so. Andy and I are going to take a break just with football ending. We'll still be active on Twitter and with articles coming up on Happy Hour Sports. So you guys can check that out as always. But for any up-to-date information, follow me at DJH Sports on Twitter or Andy at HH Sports on Twitter. We'll have some updates on what we plan to do over the offseason of Sharpen the Public because we'd like to focus on the NFL. We tried talking about the NBA last year, but some things came up. So trying to figure out what we want to do there. But yeah, as always, it's been a phenomenal season, Andy. It's been so fun talking about the NFL. It's crazy how quickly it comes. I can kind of like remember us sitting here week 1 and being like, here we go. It's time to get back into it. And now we're already at the Super Bowl. So it's surreal, but happy to do it and happy to do it with you. So I appreciate you being here.
Yeah, man. Appreciate you. Appreciate all the hard work you've done to get your podcast where it is. And I am looking forward to the Super Bowl, but also looking forward to the offseason. It should be good to finally fully focus on basketball, and I can't wait for that.
I know you're already thinking about the draft, though, too.
Oh, yeah. When you said there weren't many things you like more than the Super Bowl, I was like, well, I really like the NFL draft, but I love the NBA draft, too.
A lot of things to
and
talk
betting
about.
on it.
There you go. There you go. I love it. Well, as always, it's been Sharpen the Public. Thank you guys for listening. We will catch you in the next one.
Cheers, everybody. The boys bet better with beer.